All right, we're going to be talking about the Confederates that was on the Titanic, and we're going to be reading through this. I'm going to share this with the different Confederate groups. A large number of Civil War veterans no doubt read about the sinking of the RMS Titanic, one of history's deadliest maritime disasters. Some of those veterans may have noted a few familiar names. At least one Confederate and the relatives of two Confederate generals were on board. And this right here is a little advertisement right there in the center of the Idolus toilet soap. Among the most notable men to sail on the great vessel was Georgia native Major Archibald Butt. He was a relative of Brigadier General William R. Boggs, and he was born only 3 months after the last major Confederate forces surrendered. Butt joined the Army and gained notoriety as a master of logistics and organization. He served as military aide to his friends Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, who was presidents of the United States, being particularly close to the later, that being President William Howard Taft. It says, by the time the Titanic sank, Butt was Taft's unofficial advisor and negotiator. Many stories were spun about Butt's actions on the ship, none of which can be corroborated, as there was a desperate push after the sinking to make Butt a hero. All that can really be said for sure is that Butt died aboard and his body was not recovered. Butt's death anguished Taft, who was already facing the Republican Party on the verge of splitting. Less prominent but more directly tied to the Confederacy was Archibald Gracie, son of the Confederate brigadier commander with a third name. Gracie was born in Mobile but raised in the North. It was while attending school in New Hampshire that his father was killed on December 2nd, 1864, while looking through a telescope on the Petersburg lines. The day before his death, his daughter, Adeline Gracie, was born. Gracie became a successful real estate investor, but he was also keenly interested in the military matters. Being active in the New York militia, he did not get through West Point. Gracie used his Washington connections in an attempt to craft a national road connecting Petersburg to Gettysburg, hoping to also make the former into a battlefield park. Gracie's idea came to naught, though. He instead was absorbed in the writings and the truth about Chickamauga and a biography of his father before he could finish the biography. He boarded Titanic. He entertained a small group of most unattended women telling stories of the war. After the Titanic struck an iceberg on April 14th, Gracie and his friend J. Clench Smith placed blankets in lifeboats. They aided Second Officer Charles Lightoller in filling the boats and helped to free the collapsible boats. Gracie went down with the ship, but managed to get onto a collapsible B, which capsized in the sinking. Gracie believed he owed his success to his swimming skills. Sadly, Smith was pulled under while Gracie freed himself. In addition to Edith Corse Evans, one of the women Gracie chaperoned, also died. This is one of only 4 class female passengers to perish. It says here the bodies of neither Evans or Smith were found. It shows here, it's the grave right here, Gracie's grave. Sunk April 15th. This is right here, I think. 1912. Born 1858, died January 15th, 1858, died December 4th, 1912. So he died after the Titanic sank. Son of Josephine Mayer and General Archibald. You see here, okay. Gracie survived because of Lightoll's skill as a seaman. The second officer organized the men on the boat and took control. The sea dead calm when the Titanic sank. Gradually became worse. Without Lightoller, it is doubtful anyone would have survived on collapsible B. Eventually, the upside-down boat was recovered. Soon after, Gracie wrote The Truth About Titanic, still one of the best primary sources about the sinking. However, such was his ordeal in the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean that he was among the first survivors to die. His last words were supposedly, "We must get them in the boats. We must get them all into the boats." He is buried next to his father in a simple grave at Woodlawn Cemetery in New York City. And it goes on, it says, just as if not more famous than Bud and Gracie was Isidor Straus. He was among the 3 richest men aboard the ship, along with John Jacob Astor and Benjamin Guggenheim. Straus, a Bavarian Jew who was living in Georgia when the war came. In 1861, he secured an appointment to West Point, but stayed with the Confederacy. He was elected lieutenant of a Georgia company, but was deemed too young, and there was lack of weapons. In 1863, he went to England to purchase ships for blockade running, but failed. In 1865, he moved to New York City. He proved to be a savvy businessman, and by 1893, he was the full owner of Macy's along with his brother Nathan. The next year, he served in the House of Representatives, and after finishing his time there, turned down an offer from Grover Cleveland to be Postmaster General. As a politician, he favored reforms in education and lower tariffs. In 1892, Straus wrote a letter to his children, only to be opened upon his death. We gave them advice for keeping the family together in order to remain successful, including these lines: be quick to forgive, ready to forget, eager to acknowledge when you have been in the wrong. Stubbornness is a grievous fault. None of us are perfect, and we can always deter little shortcomings in others more quickly than we will recognize greater ones in ourselves. Difference of opinion will arise between thinking persons. Whoever may have been right should not exult and taunt the others for having been wrong. In 1911, Straus wrote an autobiography and then went to Europe for the winter, mostly spent at Cape Martin in southern France, and in Germany inspected new fabrics, which he brought back with him. He boarded the Titanic with his wife Ida. Gracie and Straus talked several times about the Civil War with Gracie, loaning Straus a copy of The Truth About Chickamauga, which he enjoyed. There's a picture of them, Isidore and Ida Straus. Here's the last photo of the Titanic we're showing right here. Let's see, one of the most famous incidents of the sinking came when Gracie tried to secure Straus a place on a lifeboat. He refused to go before the other men. Ida also refused, saying, "I will not separate from my husband, as we all lived, so we will die together." Ida gave her maid, Ellen Bird, her fur coat and saw her off. The couple went down with the ship. as did Astor and Guggenheim. Many things go in the Titanic story that make it compelling, but surely the fact that so many of the most powerful men in the world were not on board but died seemingly willingly. Isidor Strauss's body was found, but Ida's was not. He was first buried in the Strauss-Kohns mausoleum at Bethel El Cemetery in Brooklyn, then moved to the Strauss Mausoleum in Woodlawn Cemetery, the same place where his friend Gracie resides. The family collected water from the wreck and placed it in an urn in the mausoleum to represent Ida. A cenote outside the mausoleum has this passage from Song of Solomon: "Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it." The death of Isidor and Ida Strauss was placed up in the newspapers as an act of love, courage, and devotion. Those appalled by the anti-Semitism used it to counter arguments that Jews were cowardly and duplicitous. The couple received their share of honors. There's a memorial plaque on the main floor of the Macy's department store in Manhattan in Strauss Park near their Manhattan home, complete with a statue. There's even a school and a Harvard University residence hall. Most films feature the doomed couple, as well as Gracie, Astor, and Guggenheim. Although they are always bit players, not surprisingly, Nazi German 1943 film Titanic does not include Isidor and Ida Strauss. As an aside, for all the fuss and controversy over Butt in 1912, he has never been in any Titanic film. Even the much lauded A Night to Remember, although he was a major character in a novel from time to time. And right here is an image from the Night to Remember 1958. I believe that's the one that had Barbara Stanwyck, the one that played in Big Valley. She was in that film. And here's the responses from this article here. We have one from, I can't read their name. It says, "Nice memorial." Another one says, "Thank you." One from Sam Elliott says, interesting article. You might want to double check on Brown Macmillan, according to Find a Grave, which quotes a newspaper article. He died in Bristol, Tennessee in October 1912. Perhaps he was on the Titanic and survived. It says here, Sean Michael Chick says, "You appear to be correct. I have taken it out. Thanks. Thank you for spotting it. It does appear he took an interest in the sinking and wrote a poem about it, A Cross of Honor." Sammy Elliott says, "Not a problem. I saw the poem quoted in a fraternity book of some kind." It says, "I'm a biographer of his grandfather, John C. Brown, knew that he died in 1912 and hated that I might have missed such an interesting point, such as his death on the Titanic." And here says, Sherika Bellifer said, "I knew about Bud and Gracie's connection to the war, but not the others. It was said that Gracie had copies of his book on board with him and would eagerly loan them out, even when the recipient couldn't have cared less. The man was incredibly charismatic, but had journeyed to Europe to take a break from the political campaign due to the immense stress, and was still recuperating on the way back to New York. There were so many interesting characters on that ship. Thank you for sharing a bit of their stories." And here's the last one here. Katie Berman, a fascinating article, compassionately written. "I knew the Strauss story, but not all the details. How was it possible that his body was found? what can you tell us about Archibald Butt and the push to make him a hero? So there's responses here. But like I said, this is they did have a thing on here about the connection of the Titanic to Confederates. You know, I knew there was. I know there's another place that's not related to this, but the Biltmore Estate, which my brother and my mom went to visit, I think in 1999 or 2000, I believe. And there is a actual painting of the Titanic inside there, and I believe the man that owned the Biltmore Estate, the one that built it, he canceled his plans to go on the Titanic. So there is a actual painting there at the Biltmore Estate, and as they say, it's one of the biggest estates in the United States. But like I said, this is the article about this. Those who've been curious about this, about the Titanic, Confederates, I've always been curious about it. This right here basically sums it up.